Hello, fellow Movie Crusaders, and welcome to our latest episode. My name's Sean Wasserkrug, and today we're going to be doing a massive review roundup. We're going to be reviewing 7 movies on the video. Basically, like I said on previous episodes, life has kind of gotten pretty busy for me with the work promotion and everything else going on, that I just don't have time to shoot 7 individual videos for this, because it just takes too long to edit. So instead, I'm going to be doing all these reviews in one video. All these movies span over the last month or so of coming out. Normally, like I said, I normally would do individual videos for these, but now I'm just going to kind of do them all in one big swoop, unless I'm doing a special review with Brian Michaels like we did last week with The Fall Guy. But in this video, we're going to be reviewing Challengers, Late Night with the Devil, Abigail, Boy Kills World, Unfrosted, The Idea of You, and this weekend's Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. But first, we're going to start with Challengers. This is a movie that, like I said, last year, honestly, the big press for this movie has been kind of the sexiness of the film. The first trailer, the first teaser of everything coming out was literally teasing this kind of throuple relationship with Zendaya and the other 2 leads, which is Mike Fast and Josh O'Connor. And honestly, like, that was kind of the big, promoting of this film, was this, like, very hypersexual kind of film following around these young tennis players. The main story itself follows Tashi, a former tennis prodigy turned coach, turns her husband into a champion, but to overcome a losing streak, she needs to face his ex-best friend and Tashi's ex-boyfriend. This movie is done in a unique fashion in terms of storytelling. It's kind of done in a reverse timeline. We start the movie out with everything present day, and we kind of tell the story backwards. Obviously, the start of the movie is with this supposed match that's going on in the plot summary, and then we backtrack from there to kind of see how the relationship of these 3 have developed and scorned and redeveloped all the way up to this point. I will say this, I wasn't necessarily a fan of how the story development of this was going because of that plot point of, like, the timeline. But then I remembered that there was another movie that was very much like this that I actually really enjoyed, which was Kevin Costner's For the Love of the Game, where it was very much in the present, and then during the course of the game, we did a backtrack, flashback storytelling of how we got to this point, and Challengers is pretty much doing that exact same thing. In terms of the cast, Zendaya puts on a fantastic performance as Tashi. She is a force through this movie. Every scene in this movie, she is captivating. She demands full attention of the screen, and she basically does feel much like kind of the puppeteer to Mike Foss's Art and Josh O'Connor's Patrick throughout this entire film. She just seems like she's always one step ahead of them in every aspect, and they're just kind of, like I said, in the palm of her hand throughout the film. The relationship between these 3 is obviously what captivates you, but also, for me, being the sports person that I am, the tennis aspect of this is actually really well done. I fully expected this to be kind of this, like, sexually charged, romantic film with tennis kind of in the background, but tennis does take a huge chunk of this movie and is kind of the forefront of the film, so it actually is more of a sports film than it is kind of a romantic drama. I think they actually mix very well. They coexist together to the point where you're getting a nice touch of both. You're not feeling like one's getting more focus than the other, and they are utilized to their fullest potential. I think the cast, like I said, mainly of these 3, everyone else is kind of very small casted throughout it, but it is basically these 3. Like I said, Zendaya is fantastic in the film. Mike Fast, I don't know how to say his name properly, is Art. He is very solid in the film, and Josh O'Connor, who's the one actor who I wasn't really aware of, I think does a great job in this film, kind of playing off of both of them throughout. I think this movie is intellectually very well done. I think the sports aspect is done very well. I'm not a huge tennis fan per se, but I do actually enjoy tennis movies, and I was actually really intrigued with the actual tennis aspects of this film. But you're really going to see this for Zendaya and the other 2's performances, and they do not disappoint. I was captivated the whole way through. Never a dull moment in this film. Even in the quieter moments, you're just so captivated by the writing, the story, and the performances of the three leads, that there was never a moment where I was like, let's speed this up, or I want something more than the other. So for Challengers, definitely a strong recommendation. I'm going to give Challengers a 87%, one of my higher scores of the year. I think it actually is really well done, and it actually shows just how strong of a star Zendaya is coming to the forefront. She's definitely going to be one of the biggest names in Hollywood over the next, decade or two, or for however long she wants to decide doing this. She continues to impress me in everything that I see her in. Going to the next film is kind of a independent film, or I call it a Shudder movie. It's a movie that is probably getting not as much press as it should, but probably also just the right kind of amount based off of where it's getting released, and that is Late Night with the Devil. I heard good word of mouth from this movie from my movie friends. I don't have a Shudder subscription, so it wasn't something that I could easily attest to. I know there's like free subscriptions and stuff like that, but I was actually able to get a hold of this and watch it, and I was actually, for the most part, thoroughly impressed with what I saw in this film. The lead is David Dastmalchian, who is an actor that myself and Brian Michaels has said deserves to get more elevated as a top actor, getting more opportunities to lead films, which he does in this one. He has come a long way from just being the Joker henchman in The Dark Knight. Every time I see him, obviously his big breakout role was Suicide Squad. He was a highlight of that film, and he's been growing and growing since then. And so with this film, he is definitely the lead in this. The main plot point of Late Night with the Devil is a live television broadcast in 1977 goes horribly wrong, unleashing evil into the nation's living rooms. To basically go a little bit further into that, we're basically following the character of Jack Delroy. He's basically kind of like this late night talk show host who's rivaling Johnny Carson, and trying to find ways to beat him in the ratings. And after a traumatic issue that happened in his life, he's kind of been on more of the downswing with his character and his show, and he's trying to do a last-second kind of oomph to try to boost the ratings, to try to take over Carson, and to try to revive his career. And so on Halloween night, he decides to do this off-the-wall kind of show where he brings a girl on the show who has been possessed, and they try to do an exorcism for the most part on the show. And the way this film is shot is almost kind of like a found footage kind of film. It's basically playing you the B-roll of the entire show. So you're watching the show as it's being filmed, and then when they go to commercial, you're kind of following, Delroy walking around backstage, talking to people, which B-roll probably wouldn't catch that. B-roll probably would stay focused on one camera. So they take liberties in how they are shooting the film, but that didn't bother me one bit. I actually liked the idea and the concept of how they were shooting this film and how they were kind of playing it off. It, like I said, feels very much like someone's just following him around with a camera on an everyday of a shooting of this show. I think David Dastmalchian is awesome in this movie. I think he really does a great job of showing that he is capable of taking a lead actor type role. The rest of the cast is decent, if not a little below average. I mean, it's kind of what you would get with these kind of films, with these independent Shudder movies. If you get decent performances throughout the way, I think that's actually more of a plus for these Shudder films than more. Usually they're not great acting. They're usually pretty rough acting. But David Dastmalchian, Laura Gordon, she plays the doctor who's doing the exorcism in the film. The performances are okay. They're not great. But I'm not looking for the performances of this kind of film. I'm looking for a solid story, solid performance by the lead, which we get with Dastmalchian, and just the overall aesthetic creepiness vibe of this horror-type film. And I think Late Night of the Devil, for the most part, does a fantastic job of setting this table of a one-night incident that happens and kind of where they go from here. The only negative I would really have with this is probably the last 5 to 7 minutes of the movie. It does kind of go off the rails and really takes much like Birdman to a point where Birdman was kind of following everything in like a one-shot, one-take kind of thing, and then at the very end it kind of deviates away from that and kind of turns itself into a different kind of movie, which kind of makes it look like it loses its track at the end. Late Night with the Devil is kind of in the same boat. It feels very much like it's staying on point with this B-roll, and then the big thing happens at the end, and then the last 5 to 7 minutes, it kind of goes off the rails in terms of its focus and what it's trying to do. Like, I get what they're trying to do with it, but you basically are staying on this path through the whole film. You're kind of telling us what the parameters are of the story, but then in the last 5 to 7 minutes, you completely abandon that and kind of just go off and do its own thing. Also, what I kind of like about this as well is that if you really wanted to, for any like arts, drama, arts, like theater departments, you could actually kind of turn this into a play for the most part. Obviously, you have to take some liberties with, special effects and stuff once you get to the meat of the crux of the exorcism stuff in the film. But everything's shot, like I said, on this studio. You can pretty much shoot this on a stage if you wanted to, which I think is really, really cool. But yeah, Late Night of the Devil, for a Shudder film, like I said, I'm not hugely crazy about those kind of films. They're usually to me, they kind of feel like your sci-fi channel, sci-fi movies where they're like, yeah, you throw them on there for, because people will watch them because they're bored, but they're not going to be great. But I think Late Night with the Devil is actually a really solid horror film for what it's doing. If it does lose its way in the last 5 to 7 minutes, it doesn't completely ruin the film for you. It just makes me go, I kind of wish they would have stuck the ending a little bit better. So for me, I'm actually going to give Late Night with the Devil a 83%. There's a lot of it that I liked, a lot of choices that I liked, just couldn't strike the ending at the way it went. Next, we're going to stay in the horror realm, and we're going to go with Abigail. This is a movie that I've been anticipatingly waiting to watch, but because of life getting in the way, I didn't watch it until it popped on digital this weekend. Radio Silence, the guys who directed Scream 5 and Scream 6 are shooting this film. Brian and I had heard about this movie earlier in the year during our most anticipated episode. It was previously called Dracula's Daughter. It got changed to the movie Abigail. But what really sold me on this film, outside of Radio Silence directing this, is the cast. I love this cast. You have Melissa Barrera, who was in The Heights and the last 2 Scream films, who are sadly she's not going to be in the next one because of all the backstage bullshit that we've talked about on the shows previously. Dan Stevens, who is someone that Brian, Max, and myself have completely given ourselves 100% into wanting to see him succeed and become a top-tier actor in Hollywood. You got Catherine Newton, another actress that Brian and I are big fans of. Kevin Durand, who is someone that I will be talking about later in another movie, who I have been a fan of since I saw him in the very, very early days of his acting career. Another person who I feel should be elevated to way higher status than he currently is, because he is a fucking amazing actor in everything that I see him in. The late Angus Cloud, and as well as one of my favorite actors, Juan Carlo Esposito. Like I said, love the casting of this. Even before going into the movie, I was already excited because I wanted to see what this cast would do with the story given. The main plot of Abigail is after a group of criminals kidnap the ballerina daughter of a powerful underworld figure, they retreat to an isolated mansion, unaware that they are locked inside with no normal little girl. This is one of those movies that I feel like, and I said this with, I think I pretty much said this with Damsel earlier in the year, is that they could have done this, and I'm talking about, not talking about the movie itself, I'm talking about the advertising, the promos for it, all this kind of stuff. They could have sold this movie as something completely different and then shocked you halfway through the film when you found out that Abigail was a vampire, by not just giving that away in the trailers and everything like that. Because I feel like this is one of those movies that twist, which takes about 30, 40 plus minutes in the movie to actually get to, would have been so much better and so much more effective if they hadn't have given that away in every advertising promo or trailer or commercial or anything like that, because it is done so effectively throughout this film that as I was watching this with my girlfriend, we were both going, if they hadn't given this away and we didn't know that this was happening, that would have just bumped this movie up to another level of just awesomeness, because the movie is pretty great. I really enjoyed Abigail for what it was, but I felt like they gave away the highlight of the film in the trailers and the promo work. And this movie is good enough on its own 2 feet that they could have just had this be a heist story where something is in the house and they don't know what it is and craziness ensues and how are these people going to get out of it without giving away that Abigail was a vampire. So that was just one thing that I really wish that they could have done, or could have trusted the film on its own than having the studio give that away. in the trailers. Like I said, the cast is great. Melissa Barrera continues to shine in every movie that I've seen her in so far. Dan Stevens, fantastic in the film. I love him. This is now his second movie of the year that I feel like he's kind of been one of the MVPs of the film with this, and then Godzilla X Kong: The New Empire. Kevin Durant is the highlight of this film. He plays Peter, who's kind of like the big muscle dumb brute, and his lines hit every single fucking time. He is a delight to watch on screen. I have a big smile on my face every time he talked because everything he hit just delivered. Catherine Newton as Sammy, she gets a little less to do than the others, but she does hit everything that she does because she's great as well. If there is a weak link, not that I want to talk ill of the late passing of Angus Cloud, he is probably the weak link of this film. His character didn't really flow with me with the rest of the film. I actually kind of just disliked his performance throughout the whole movie. It just didn't flow with the rest of the cast. Like, I get you kind of have to have the idiot of the group, but this group just seems way too professional and good at their jobs to have someone like the Dean character, played by Angus Cloud, to be in that mix. It just felt very cartoonish and not a part of the group as everyone else was. So it just kind of felt off with the rest of the tone of the film. Huge shout out for Alicia Ware, who plays Abigail. This young actress, I was not prepared for her performance to be as good as it was. I thought she knocked this out of the park. She is definitely now a young actress that I'm going to take more focus on in her future roles. I thought she delivered a fantastic performance as Abigail. She owned the screen whenever she was on, and when we do get the inevitable turn of her being, obviously, Abigail the vampire, she just chewed the scenery in the best possible way. The gore in this film is over the top in a fun and disgusting way. The humor throughout this film is great. There's so many laugh out loud moments through this film, mainly through the chemistry of the cast and the dialogue. They all deliver on all their marks. The action is also real well done with what we get. There's so much to like about this movie. I had a blast watching it. It's got, twists and turns and all this other kind of stuff throughout the film. I had a lot of fun watching it, but I do think that they could have held back on releasing that Abigail was a vampire in the promos to have really elevated it to the next level. But so for me, I'm going to give Abigail an 84%. Definitely something worth checking out on digital if you guys have a chance to check it out. Coming up next, we have Boy Kills World. This is a movie that Brian and myself have been real excited for since we've first heard about it last year. Bill Skarsgård is an actor that we've been keeping a real close eye on ever since, obviously, his breakout performance as Pennywise the Clown in the It franchise. This movie reminded us of two movies that Brian and I are really passionate and love, and we love to talk about it ad nauseum, and that is Guns Akimbo and Boss Level. Those are two films that have a great cast surrounding it that maybe is not being noticed or recognized by a lot of people out there, and this is my plug for them, is watch Guns Akimbo and watch Boss Level. Boy Kills World is just this fever dream of a weird, awesome action film that is just not afraid to kind of just go out there and do the weirdest shit possible. The main plot point for Boy Kills World is a fever dream action film that follows a boy, a deaf person with a vibrant imagination. When his family is murdered, he is trained by a mysterious shaman to repress his childish imagination and become an instrument of death. Cast-wise, like I said, you got Bill Skarsgård as Boy, you got Jessica Roth as June 27, you've got Michelle Dockery, you got Brett Gilman, who's always a delight on film, you got Isaiah Mustafa, you've got Famke Janssen, you got Charlita Copley, H. John Benjamin, who does the voice of Boy, which anyone who's a fan of Bob's Burgers or Archer, you guys are going to hear that voice and immediately go to that point, which he basically plays the inner dialogue, inner voice of Boy throughout the film, since he's basically a deaf mute. But the action of this film is what's really going to be selling. This is a gory, bloody action film. It's got some humor throughout. Does go a little too far into the weird realm, and that it might be a turnoff for some. I do think for me, the first act doesn't quite gel well with the rest of the film. They just try to go way too over to the weird zone of the deep end, and it almost doesn't make itself back. But once we get into about the 30-minute mark, when Boy decides to go off on his own to try and get revenge on the people who killed his family, that is when the movie really starts to kick into the movie that I was hoping it would be, which is basically a revenge tale of him basically taking on, almost like a video game, taking on all the bosses and trying to get, revenge at the end of the day. Skarsgård, I think, does a great job of selling this film through just his facial expressions because he has to, because he doesn't talk throughout the film. I think H. John Benjamin, I think, is obviously a delight in terms of voice acting. Not all of his jokes land, but I don't blame that necessarily on his performance. I blame that on kind of the writing and the timing of when he says his lines throughout the film. There's a certain part near the end of the movie that a big reveal happens that I was shocked that we got no inner dialogue at that point from H. John Benjamin, which kind of felt a little off that he wouldn't have any thoughts or anything to say at those points in the movie. The action, though, is really well choreographed. Skarsgård does a great job of performing the choreographed scenes. He got himself in super serious shape for this role. The rest of the cast is solid to below average. There's certain performances that aren't that strong, which I saw in the trailers and was immediately worried about before seeing the movie, and they did not disappoint in terms of my worry. The rest of the cast, like I said, is a solid cast throughout. It's just there are certain points where the movie just does not hit where it's supposed to hit. But in terms of action and Skarsgård's performance, it definitely does. I think Jessica Roth, who's an actress that I actually really enjoy and love from the Happy Death Day movies, I think she could have been utilized a little bit more and better in the film. We don't really get to see her until basically the last 15, 20 minutes of the film because she's wearing a helmet through most of the film, which could be basically her stunt double. But I think her look is fantastic. I love the way she looks through the film. I just wish we would have gotten more of a performance out of her throughout the rest of the movie. But like I said, if you're looking for something like crazy action, gory kind of film that has some fun aesthetics with some great action, I think Boy Kills World is going to satisfy those needs. Just kind of ride the wave of the over-the-top weirdness. Like I said, it's not going to be for everybody, but I think you're going to still enjoy the ride. For me, I'm going to give Boy Kills World in a 66%. Coming up next, we have the Netflix film Unfrosted. I believe this is the directorial debut of Jerry Seinfeld. And this is basically kind of much like we got with Air and Tetris last year. This is basically the story of how the Pop-Tart came to life and how the story of the Pop-Tart came to be. It's obviously done to a comedic effect, so obviously I'm sure there's a lot of this. It's not based on a true story or anything like that, much like Tetris to a point. But basically the main plot is, in 1963 Michigan, business rivals of Kellogg's and Post compete to create a cake that could change the breakfast world forever. This cast is a smorgasbord of great comedians, and it's one of those movies that, and I said this in our summer preview, which you guys can check out on the channel with Brian, is that a cast like this shouldn't fail. It is too good of a cast to fail, but we have seen movies in the past, much like The Bubble and Fool's Paradise, where just because you have a great cast of comedians doesn't necessarily mean that the writing and the jokes are going to land. And that was one worry that we were going to have with this film. Jerry Seinfeld, I'm not the biggest Seinfeld fan. I think he has good stand-up, but I think in terms of acting on screen, he's actually a very shitty actor. And he does not do anything in this movie to really sway me one way or another. He kind of comes off like a Kmart Tim Allen through most of this movie. He's just kind of there doing, it's like, hey, I'm doing my stand-up and everything else is happening around me. That's crazy. And that's kind of what Jerry Seinfeld feels like through this film. It's the rest of the cast around him that sell this movie for what it is. You got Jim Gaffigan, Christian Slater, Hugh Grant, Patrick Warburton, Amy Schumer, Max Greenfield, Melissa McCarthy. The list goes on and on and on. There's about a cast of 30-plus people in this film. And yes, most of them are just cameos, the movie, where they pop in for 30 seconds going, oh, hey, I'm this person from the 60s. That's a funny thing. And then they go on to the next thing. And here's this other actor that you guys all know who's only in the screen for 15 seconds because I guess they wanted to come shoot this with Jerry Seinfeld for 13 seconds, and then that's it. It just kind of is more like you could play like a bingo card with this movie for the cameos, but they don't bring anything to the film itself. I think Unfrosted is not necessarily a funny movie. It's just basically a bunch of comedians and actors that we actually enjoy watching that are thrown into this film, and they are being thrown in to basically try to give this movie life. Some work, a lot doesn't. The movie's not necessarily good at all, but it's also not Fool's Paradise, where it just is an hour and a half of seeing a lot of actors that we like, but it does not look like they're having fun. The story's bad. There's nothing to laugh about in that film. With Unfrosted, there is an actual story being told in this film, unlike Fool's Paradise and The Bubble. And the most important thing is that the cast actually looks like they're having a blast shooting this film, which is what kept me from just outright hating this movie. I know this is not a good movie, and I know this is not a movie that I would necessarily recommend for you guys to watch, but at least while watching it, I could see the fun that the cast was having throughout, and because of that, it kept me not necessarily invested, but it kept me entertained at the barest of barest minimums to at least, make it through the 30-minute or the 90-minute runtime. And because of that, that's probably the one plus I can give this film, is that as well as the story is not necessarily entertaining, the performances are fine, but I can see the fun being put into this film, and because of that, it's not going to be the worst film of the year. It's one of the worst films, but it's not the worst film. That's still going to go to Madam Web, because that movie's just dog shit. But I can see the fun on the set, and that at least sells me to like it a little bit more than most. So for me, I'm going to give Unfrosted a 31%. That's on Netflix right now. Watch it at your own risk. If you want to watch a lot of these actors that you enjoy watching, you can check them out. Some are on only for like 10 seconds. Others actually have legitimate, characters in the film that you might see a lot longer. Just don't expect to love the movie, but expect to at least have fun watching these people act like idiots on screen. Going to our next film, we have Amazon Prime's The Idea of You. Anne Hathaway is an actress that I have loved since the very first day I saw her. I enjoy her in everything she's in. And this is basically kind of your romantic dramedy kind of film. The story follows, I think it's Soline, I think is how you say her name. A 40-year-old single mom begins an unexpected romance with a 24-year-old Hayes Campbell, the lead singer of August Moon, the hottest boy band on the planet. The main plot point of this is basically she's a cougar. I mean, she's not like necessarily trying to be a cougar, but that's what they basically dub her as when the press and all these people find out that she's dating this young man, come on. I mean, it's a little ridiculous to a point. I mean, Anne Hathaway is fantastic in the film. I mean, she's fantastic in about 90% of the movies that she's in. She's never the worst part of anything in any of these movies. Was it Nicholas Galtzine, I think is how you say his name. I'm probably saying it wrong. He's solid in the film as Hayes. But what really works in this movie is the story that's being told. I mean, yes, you got an older woman meeting a young man, and they basically fall for each other, and you have this aesthetic as he's in the limelight, so naturally she's being drugged through the dirt because she's an older woman. There's actually a legitimate line in the film where she says, "I never understood, or I didn't think the world would hate me so much for just being happy," which was a line that resonates throughout the film because the Soline character is a very likable character. Everyone, for the most part, outside of the characters that you're not supposed to like, are all likable. There's never a moment where you think Hayes is taking advantage of Soline or Soline's taking advantage of Hayes. They're just two souls who fight each other, who are captivated by each other. It's not a money thing or anything like that. They just fit as a couple, and you can buy the chemistry between the two. And it's actually a very solid film throughout, an enjoyable film through the performances. It's sad at moments because you just want to see these two be happy, but the world just won't let them. They just keep getting in the way. Obviously, Celine also has to run into the issue of her daughter, Izzy, played by Ella Rubin, who's solid in the film as well, where, she wants to be happy, but then it also affects the life of her 16-year-old daughter, Izzy. You also got her ex-husband, played by Reed Scott, who I love him as an actor. He does a great job of kind of being this asshole in the film. But it's the story of a woman who has to sacrifice her happiness for everyone else around her, and is she willing to find a way to balance it, or just continue to kind of live in this moment where she has to suffer because everyone else around her can't handle the happiness that she's currently carrying. And of course, with the Hayes character, I mean, he's Mr. Boy Band. He's like the Styles of One Direction. He can either stay with the older woman, or he can kind of stay in his lane of being like a boy band guy and kind of stay there. And I think the story is well done. It's based on a book. Like I said, performance is solid throughout. This movie's not going to be for everybody. But I went into it to watch it strictly because of Anne Hathaway, and I actually came out really enjoying the film overall. And I think if you guys are going in with that mindset, I think you guys will enjoy it as well. I gave The Idea of You an 84%. It was better than I expected it to be. Anne Hathaway and Nicholas Galtzine are great through the film, and I think if you guys are looking for this kind of movie, I think you guys are going to be very happy with it. Going to our final film, one of my more anticipated films of the year and of the summer, Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. I am a huge fan of the trilogy that came out in the 2010s. Andy Serkis's Caesar is probably one of my favorite characters ever created, mainly because Andy Serkis is one of the best underappreciated actors in Hollywood. Dude should have won at least 2 Oscars for his performances as Caesar. Dawn and War, The Planet of the Apes, were my 2 favorite films of the year when they came out. Rise is also incredibly underrated as an opening to a new trilogy. But we got that story. That story, started and ended. It's one of the best trilogies ever made, in my opinion. And so when they announced that they were kind of starting a new trilogy, starting with Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, I was a little hesitant. And I was a little worried, because Andy Serkis is not coming back to reprise the role of Caesar or to play any new characters, with any of the new apes in the film. Matthew Reeves, who did Dawn and War, he has moved on to the Batman and stuff like that, so we knew he wasn't coming back to direct. So while I'm excited to see the new, venture of the Planet of the Apes franchise, I was a little hesitant and a little worried that they weren't going to quite match what we got with the last 2 films with Reeves and Andy Serkis gone. The main plot for Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes is 200 years after the reign of Caesar, a young ape goes on a journey that will lead him to question everything he's been taught about the past and make choices that will define a future for apes and humans alike. For the most part, this is a relatively I don't want to say no-name cast, because there are people here that we know. But in terms of, star power, there's not a huge star power in this film, much like when we had Andy Serkis or James Franco, Woody Harrelson, Gary Oldman. We don't have a big name in this film. Honestly, probably the biggest name in this movie is probably my boy, who I talked about earlier, Kevin Durand, which is not a big name. Also, Freya Allan. Many people know her from the Witcher series. She's the main human in the film. She plays May. Kevin Durand plays Proximus Caesar, who's the new king of the apes in this film. The lead is Noah, played by Owen Teague. I don't really know that actor. So like I said, it's a relative no-name cast to a point. But like I said, the main plot, we follow Noah, who is part of this clan of apes that basically raise eagles. They call themselves the Eagles Clan. And like I said, it's a new world. Humans are basically, for the most part, like we saw at the end of War of the Planet of the Apes, they're very much kind of like apes are today. They don't really talk or communicate. They're wild. They kind of just run around. They're more like scavengers. And apes are obviously more like humans, where they can have full-on conversations and have their own ways of beliefs, their religions, and stuff like that. And it isn't until Noah's clan is attacked by this other clan, I think they call them like the Hands of Caesar or something like that, that he must now go on a journey to try and save his clan, who was captured. And basically through the way he meets May, which is a human who actually has the ability to do things that other humans of this time are not able to do. In terms of how Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes is, compared to the previous franchise, obviously we're not going to have the brilliant performance of Andy Serkis leading the way as Caesar. And the human cast, for the most part, is basically Freya Allan. Oh, and I forgot William H. Macy is in the film as well. So you really only have 2 human casts in this movie. This movie is strictly riding on the shoulders of the apes in this film, and they actually do a very solid job. I think Owen Teague does a great job as Noah. Also, a big shout out to I believe it's Peter McCann, who plays Raka, who's kind of the orangutan character. He's kind of the Maurice of the film from the OG trilogy. I think he does a great job. And of course, once again, another stellar supporting performance from Kevin Durant as Proximus Caesar. I think the voice cast is very solid throughout the whole film. Also, Eka Darville, who most people will know from The Defenders, Jessica Jones, Spartacus. He plays Silva, which is the kind of the lead gorilla muscle for Proximus Caesar, who's basically kind of the main villain of the film, more so than Proximus Caesar. I think he does a great job in the film as well. I think the crux of these films and what made it work for the original OG trilogy and what also works in Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes is the thoughts and emotions and feelings we get for the apes in this film. With Noah, we have him and his friendship with Anya and I think it's Sonia. We get this relationship between these three right at the start of the film. We are establishing their friendship of their three-way friendship connection throughout. Also, him with his father and his mother, and then once they're all taken away from him by this clan, his mission to try and save them and capture them back, as well as once he meets Raka and May. It's the journey that Noah goes through. He is the new Caesar of this film, and I think Owen Teague does a great job. Obviously, the special effects animations to make the apes look as realistic and emotionally connected as possible is what makes Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes work so well, just like it did with the previous trilogy. There are certain things that don't quite work. I can't really explain that without going into spoiler, which I'm not going to do. There are certain aspects that I wish they could have hit a little bit better on or done a little bit differently to make it just a little more stronger, much like Dawn and War of the Planet of the Apes. But I feel like Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes is a great starting off point for this trilogy, much like Rise was. I think Rise, if I have to go, Rise is probably the weakest of the original trilogy. But it's still a great film. It just doesn't hit the heights that Dawn and War did. Once again, different director. And I feel like Wes Ball, who directed the Maze Runner films, actually does a great job here with Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. It's a great starting off point for this new trilogy. I'm excited to see where they go from here on this. I'm excited to continue with the Noah character, with the May character, and see exactly where we're going to go with this. For me, I am giving Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes an 86%. I think it does everything that it sets out to do. It gives you that callback to the OG trilogy, and I say OG trilogy, I mean the trilogy from the 2010s, not the original Planet of the Apes. But it's a great starting off point. It has that connective tissue to the trilogy, as well as doing something new and unique to further prove that the franchise has the legs to keep going. Strong recommendation. Definitely check it out. I got to see it in IMAX finally, and it is a movie deserving of the IMAX treatment. So if you have IMAX in your area, definitely check it out. I hope you guys enjoyed all these reviews. If you guys did, go ahead and hit that like, share, and subscribe button to the channel so you guys stay up to date with all the latest videos pop up on the Movie Crusaders. Of course, look at the follow us on all the social media outlets you see below. Coming up next, we've got Furiosa, a Mad Max saga. That's the next big film coming out here. I'm sure Brian and myself will be back for another episode of the Movie Crusaders Chat About, which we will talk about whatever the hell we want to talk about, because that's the luxury of that show. So we got many more stuff to come in the channel. Also, like I said, our Fall Guy trailer, or Fall Guy review from last week is still on the channel, as well as the rest of our summer movie preview, where you guys can check out everything that we think about all for the movies that are coming down from now through the end of August. So feel free to check out those videos. And until next time, in case we don't see you, go watch some movies and go have some fun.
You're still here. It's over. Go home.